Hello, learners, and welcome back to the course on social processes and behavioral issues. And we are today in Unit 9 and Session 1 of this course. So, in today's session, we shall be concentrating on a very important area of research and development, which is called as personality. Now, specifically in today's session, we will be looking at the meaning of personality, the self concept, the type and trait theories, the psychoanalytic theory, and the social psychological theory of personality. So, basically, today's session will be an introduction, will be a gateway to the meaning associated with personality and the various theories that have shaped the understanding of personality as we know it today. Now, coming to what does personality mean? So, if we are to answer this question, personality has originated from the Latin word persona. Now, what does it mean? It is a relatively stable set of characteristics that influences an individual's behavior. So, if we are to look at keywords, then what are those keywords from this understanding or from this explanation? The first is stability, in what, in a set of characteristics, and these stable set of characteristics in an individual have the potency or the potential to influence behavior. Now, the nature of personality is that it has both internal and external elements. That means it can be shaped both by internal and external elements. Now, it is relatively stable, it is inherited, and it is also shaped by the environment. And each individual is unique in his or her own behavior or in his or her own persona or personality. Now, moving on to something that we understand as the self concept. What is the meaning of the self concept? When people try to understand themselves, it is labeled as the self concept, and it includes many dimensions like how people affect others, how they see and understand themselves, what is the pattern of their inner and measurable traits, and what is the person situation interaction. And the self concept, being a key facet in personality research, is very closely interlinked with concepts that have deep meaning in organization behavior, like self esteem and self efficacy. Now, self efficacy is one of the concepts which has been heavily researched in all domains of organization behavior and human resource management. And self efficacy is basically rooted within the social cognitive theory of Albert Bandura, and it talks about an innate confidence that a person, that an individual has in his or her own capacities or capabilities to achieve whatever he or she sets out to. Now, moving on to the theories of personality. Personality is one of those areas which has been dominated by a number of theories, some of them which may sound similar but which are actually different and have given different varied flavors to the meaning of personality, to the research on personality as we know it today. Now, we'll start today with the first, which is the type theories of personality. Now, here is where theorists have said that, identical types or categories like body types, the physical stature of a person, may have an influence on the personality that he or she carries. Now, there is also another basis of typing personalities or categorizing personalities based on types, and those are through the psychological factors. And the proponent of this theory has basically been Carl Jung, and he had categorized personalities into introverts and extroverts, usually indicating a person's sociability and interpersonal orientation. Now, the Jungian principles of introversion and extraversion have become very important in the overall measurement of personality through an instrument that we commonly know today as the MBTI, or the Myers Briggs Type Inventory. Now, what is the MBTI? MBTI is a profiling of personality that is done, and the genesis of MBTI has been the Carl Jung theories, where he has looked at people as possessing a certain set of preferences or behaving as per a certain set of preferences. Now, if we understand the MBTI, it's the idea of choice or preference, which is very, very central to the understanding of this instrument. Now, although we may be able to think and act in various ways, we prefer to act or think in particular ways according to our preference. We develop a whole range of preferences in the course of our lives, and our personality type can be recognized by the totality of our individual preferences. So, the idea of choice and the idea of preference is central to the understanding of the MBTI, and it was developed by a mother daughter duo by the name of Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs. So, what are those bipolars which you find in the MBTI? As is mentioned, MBTI is one of the most widely used instrument in the world for personality profiling, and participants are classified on four axes, which are also called as preferences. So, what are these preferences? The first is looking at two preferences, which are also bipolars, and these are called as extraversion and introversion. Now, extroversion relates to sociable and assertive personalities, whereas introversion relates to quiet and shy personalities. Now, the next is called as sensing versus intuiting. Sensing versus intuiting basically looks at the preference that individuals have while they are collecting information. Now, either you are very practical and orderly in the way in which you collect information, that is, you rely on your sense organs, so which is basically called as sensing, or you rely on something called as intuition or unconscious processes or the sixth sense or the gut instinct while you are collecting information. Now, thinking versus feeling is the next, which looks at what do you do with this information? How do you take decisions? Do you use reason and logic while taking decisions? That is called as a thinking person. Or do you use emotions or values while you make decisions? Those are the feeling persons. And the last of the bipolars are judging versus perceiving. Do you want order and structure in the world around you, or are you flexible and spontaneous, open to very many new experiences? Now, that would be the perceiving type. So, basically, we are looking at four sets of bipolars in the MBTI, and the combination of these bipolars have given birth to multiple personality prototypes, which can be found using and scoring yourself on this instrument. Now, moving on, there have been certain limitations to the type theories, and these limitations are the consideration of bipolar opposites, which is where you are not looking at the entire spectrum of personality, and that's the reason why these theories do not touch upon the nuances and complexity that personality normally associates with. Now, moving on, the next of the theories that have shaped the thinking on personality research are called as the trait theories. Now, what are the trait theories, or what is the meaning that one associates with the word trait? Trait means characteristics. So, this theory is based on three primary assumptions, that is, traits or characteristics, though common to many individuals, may vary in absolute terms between people. Traits are usually and relatively stable and have universal effects on behavior, irrespective of the environment or situation. It is possible to infer about traits by measuring behavioral indicators. Now, there are two categories of trait theories, one which has been developed by Alcott and the other which has been developed by Raymond Cattell. Now, Alcott's theory differentiates between common traits and certain personal dispositions that are more individual in nature, while Cattell identifies surface traits and source traits. Now, in the trait theory, despite being formed or despite originating from the work of Gordon Allport and Raymond Cattell, trait theories are very, very influenced by the big five generic traits. Now, the big five traits also have helped in personality profiling, and these are called as generic traits, which can be used in many different situations. Now, what are these traits? The first is extraversion, which means gregarious, assertive, and sociable. Then the second is called as agreeableness, which refers to these traits or characteristics like cooperative, warm, and agreeable. Then the third is called as conscientiousness, where you're looking at hardworking, organized, and dependable people. Then the fourth is emotional stability, calm, self-confident, and cool. And the last is openness to experience, curious, creative, and culture. Now, the Big Five have had tremendous scope for research in organization behavior, and they have been researched in different domains of organization behavior, human resource management, and human resource development. Now, if we look at how do the Big Five predict behavior, research has shown this to be a better framework for predicting behavior. Now, for example, highly conscientious people develop more job knowledge, exert greater effort, and have better performance at work. Other Big Five traits also have implications for work. Emotional stability is related to job satisfaction. Extroverts tend to be happier in their jobs and have very, very good social skills. Open people are more creative and hence can see the big picture and even become better leaders. Now, agreeable people are normally good in social setting like the teams. So, moving on from the trait theories, we go into the next category of theories, which are called as the psychoanalytic theory. The psychoanalytic theory is synonymous with Sigmund Freud, but if we look at the founding fathers of the psychoanalytic theory, we have Freud, Adler, and Jung. Now, the psychoanalytic theory comprises of three major components, and these three major components are also as old as time in personality research. And the first of them is called as ETH, or the source of psychic energy, which requires immediate gratification for biological or instinctual needs. Okay, so ETH refers to basically those unconscious processes which are available in all individuals, which are there in all individuals, which are more to do with biological needs and instinctual needs, which require immediate gratification. So, Eid basically is looking at immediate satisfaction. Now, there's something called ego as well. What is the ego? The ego state is the conscious and logical part of the human personality and works on the principle of reality. Ego represents the conscious aspect and by using intellectual reasoning of the reality keeps the id in check. Now, id is our unconscious instinctive requirement which we want to satisfy at any cost. But then there has to be a reasoning, there has to be an intellect which differentiates us with all other primary beings in the universe, and that comes from the ego. Now, what is the ego? The ego is the most conscious part of the human personality which keeps the ego in check. Now, there is something also called as a superego. Now, the superego represents the norms. What are these norms, or where do these norms come from? They come from the society and they also come from an individual. So, you may have societal or personal norms, and it puts an ethical constraint on the behavior, just like one's conscience. So, if we are looking at E, we are looking at primary instincts. If we are looking at ego, we are looking at intellectual reasoning. If we are looking at superego, we are looking at conscience. So, all of these three interplay together to create a dynamic state which is called as personality. Now, emphasis on the unconscious for all activities and lack of verification of the theory can be called as limitations. Much of these theories, much of the components of this theory were not subject to measurement, and that's the reason why they raised tremendous amount of doubts in terms of efficacy or in terms of utility. Now, the other was that Freud has been criticized for attributing a lot of human activities to unconscious processes. So, how true is it? Can it be verified? How efficacious is this kind of thinking? These have been the common questions associated with the psychoanalytic theory. Now, moving on, we come to the next, which is the social psychological theory of personality. Now, this is one of those theories which looks at the interdependence of the individual and the society. And we have the foundations of this theory from Horney, Fromm, and Sullivan. Now, on the one hand, the individual strives to meet the needs of the society. On the other hand, the society helps the individual to attain his or her goal. So it's a cyclical process where the individual is dependent on the society and the society is equally dependent on the individual. Now, this social psychological theory does differ from the psychoanalytic theory as it takes into account social variables and not biological constructs. Now, the other area that we need to be very conscious about when we are looking at this theory is that the behavioral motivation in this theory is a conscious effort and it's not largely unconscious as Freud had pointed out in the psychoanalytic theory. After knowing one's wants and needs, man's behavior will be directed to meet those needs. So it's a very conscious effort that a person, he or she, is making to get what he or she requires. So now, once again, summing up what we did in today's session, we began with the very concept of personality, the meaning associated to personality, where we are looking at stability in traits which may have the potential to influence one's own behavior. Now, moving on, personality has been greatly shaped by the study of the self concept, where humans have attempted to understand themselves, because understanding your own self is also the gateway to understanding others. Now, the self concept has led way or has paved the path for multiple theories of personality to take shape and to give shape to the research on personality. So, we have looked at four different theories basically in today's session. The first of which is the type theory, the second is the trait theory, the third is the psychoanalytic theory, and the fourth is the social psychological theory. Now, while we discuss the type theories, the understanding or the basic information about the MBTI becomes important. On the other hand, while we are talking about the trait theories, a basic understanding of the big five generic traits becomes important. So, these have been the highlights of today's session. Very, very happy reading and a good learning experience. I thank you for your patient attention.